From the world of AV programming and control with James King, I'm Steve Greenblatt, and this is Ask the Programmer. James, how are you today? I'm looking forward to another conversation, and we have returning guests to share some knowledge and wisdom with our team.
Oh, I'm doing good, Steve. It's always great when we have a guest, and looking forward to this conversation because I felt the last one was very well. And how are you doing?
Doing pretty well. Doing well. Looking forward to this conversation in particular. And if you didn't catch our last episode, we had Leon Prather, and he's a co-host of the Brave Skills podcast. He also talked to us a little bit about what is simple and so forth. And without further ado, welcome back, Leon.
Thank you very much for having me. Hello, James, and hello, Steve.
Thanks for being here. And if you would like to catch Leon's background, you can tune into our previous episode 226. He talked a little bit about how he's been in AV for probably 80% of his life, which is pretty impressive. And I think that that's something to listen to. And we got to talking a little bit about how programmers need to be able to have a little bit of empathy and put themselves in other people's shoes and understand about how what they do impacts others, and that there isn't a one size fits all solution. And um, Leon, in particular, you like to talk about some of the soft skills, and you like to talk about some of the things that um, professionals within any industry should learn about. And I think that these things a lot of times are geared more toward people in higher levels or expected of people in management or leadership, but it also can apply to really anybody at any level. And since programmers do need to have human contact, even though some of them may not want to, talk a little bit about what are some tips or concepts that you think that programmers should be more in tune with in terms of being able to be more successful in what they do.
Absolutely. Thank you for that background there. So, in the last episode, one of the points that we brought up at the end was that decision makers today are often not technicians. And we also mentioned that oftentimes, as programmers or technicians, we are puzzle piece lovers. We are puzzle solvers and problem solvers. So we see the things that are complex, and we kind of enjoy the challenge of trying to make those things simple. But along the way, while that might be fun for us, someone might be having not the best experience. And I think one of the things that's great to think about is if someone is coming to you with a need and you're a technician, there's a good chance they have what they would call a problem that needs to be solved, right? There's an issue that needs to be solved. I think one really good practical tip, a soft skill tip, is to recognize that that's the case. It's going to be really important that the solution that you give is actually a solution, but not a technological solution. It has to be a solution for that person. You're just going to use technology where necessary to solve it. So if someone's making a final decision on if you're working professionally, or working in programming professionally or in technology professionally, if someone's making a decision that it's going to impact you, you should probably think about how what you're doing is going to impact them. If this is someone that's going to be paying you, there may be a client. You should think about the fact that it's a human that's going to be doing that. So recognizing where someone's coming from is going to be incredibly important and help guide your efforts toward creating that solution, because you're going to keep that person in mind. This could also be someone that holds the keys to whether you're hired, promoted, whatever. Those soft skills often will separate you from others. Um, I hate to say, uh, I couldn't give a percentage at all on how many people are in our industries who may not exhibit a lot of the soft skills that I think are really necessary for helping them advance or succeed. But I do know that I've been in job interviews with folks who did not have them, but they had all the right hard skills on paper. And I will say, I did not hire those people when there was someone who had fewer hard skills, but excelled at the soft, and I did not regret the decision because ultimately, at the end of the day, Steve, you mentioned this: a programmer and a technician, especially in AV, they are working with people. They're not locked in a room. That 80s image that we have of hackers, or they're just in a dark room, blue lights with a hoodie on. They don't have to talk to anybody. That's not reality. That, that it's just not reality. They have to interact with people. Um, if we have time, I might talk about a certain, a particular interview that I gave that where we got to kind of see in action where someone was going to succeed or fail in the role, and I'm really glad that we did. But ultimately, I think pay attention to the person. That's a long-winded way of getting getting at it. Pay attention to the person before you act, before you say anything, and ask questions.
So the question that I would think somebody would be saying is, so how do I go about that?
Mhm.
What are some ways that programmers, if they want to, or they realize that they need to be able to expand their horizons, are there some tangible resources for them?
Yeah, so I think there's of course shameless plug. You could listen to the Brave Skills podcast for sure. But there's lots of books. But one of the things that I think is really, really, really valuable is talking to other people who are in a somewhat similar space than you. And I don't necessarily mean they're in the same industry. I mean they're in a similar space. So I've learned so much from talking to other people that are in support roles that aren't actually in technology. I've learned through watching them, seeing how they interact with people. I've learned so much. I take notes when I've had a few people at like the C-suite level that in different companies that I absolutely just said to myself, if I could work with this person forever, I would probably be learning something every day. And there are times where I would just kind of note certain things that seem to always be true about their interactions with folks. Not because I thought if I did that, well, I'll be the president of something one day. I just realized it worked.
Mm.
What they were doing worked. Um, they were doing really well at diffusing a situation, or explaining something that really could have been over people's heads, but doing it at the right level, the right tone, the right pace, the right attitude. Um, yeah, I think talking to people about the scenarios you're going through and asking people about theirs, those are the things. So maybe the most practical piece here I think is asking questions. Asking questions of people who you feel like are doing certain things well that you don't feel like you're doing as well. Don't be an island. Ask
Mm.
them, ask them for their advice. We were saying, I don't remember if it was Steve or James who had mentioned it as well, but many times if we're a programmer or a technician, we may be one of very few around on our teams, and it may not feel like we have a lot of people to talk about our scenarios and our perspective and our challenges. It may not feel like we've got too many people to rub shoulders with. And that might be the case. So, reach out to what's the Ask the Programmer community and others like that. It may not be the case, but it's really important that when you open up, or that you recognize that when you open up to ask a question, you're also enabling someone else to do the same back to you. And that's sort of how we all get better as a group. And it's sort of a rising tides raise all ships in my mind. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes me think about the concept of that you're the average of the people that you spend the most time with, and I think that when you're spending time with people that you are raising you up, or that are maybe a little bit higher level than you, or a little bit more advanced than you, or people that you want to be like, you're naturally going to they're going to rub off on you, or you're going to be learning from them whether
Mm-hmm.
you know it or not. So I like that a lot. Any thoughts on that, James?
I think Leon hit some great sources. I mean, I'm a big fan of Brave skills. I think it's a good podcast, and as Leon said, no shame in plug. It's a uh, very well informed information that's provided
Thank
from
you.
there. Um, then there's others like I'm a big fan of Coaching for Leaders podcast,
Mm.
which I find very useful as well. And then, like you said, Leon said, reading books, find that, and just sitting there. And then if you really, I think, want to learn, but you're too afraid to ask somebody, go and people watch, but go and people watch at a restaurant because we are all very picky about our food. So
Hmm.
how servers handle conflict and handle people who are very
Mm.
picky about their food is a good way to learn. You can sit there and go, okay, I don't want to be like that server because that server was a jerk. Oh, I want to be like that server because they handle that situation very professional. Just sit there and people watch. You don't have to even interact with them. Just sit there and watch.
Seems like this is a recurring theme about restaurants. So that
Yeah.
I wonder if we need to be recruiting AV people from the restaurant business. I don't know.
Uh, a little behind the scenes. That's one of the things I look for on resumes
Interesting.
Oh, that's so
because
funny.
because I like I said, if I feel people have restaurant experience, eat fast food or people are so picky about food. I
Mhm.
worked at an ice cream parlor. I was a busboy. Or I understand how people are when it comes to their food. And I mean, I'm picky about my food. So it puts you in a lot of different situations, how to interact with people, how to talk to them, how to get their order, how to get what they want when they don't even know what they want. So it's
That's a
one
big
of the
one.
key
Yeah.
aspects that I look
Hmm.
for when I'm hiring.
Yeah, and they can't do that. They can't do that well without attending to people. There, it's- I think I'm going to sound like real smart for a second, but I want to say I learned this from someone else. But there's I think I want to say I think this was a pastor at maybe an old church or something, but he had mentioned that the idea of waiting, oftentimes like in the Bible they say this, or even like in Old English the word wait is used, and we think wait means like, you're looking at your clock, okay, I'm waiting for you, I'm waiting. That's actually not oftentimes what people meant years ago when they were saying that. They were talking about waiting like a waiter waits on you. They're not waiting for you to do something. They're standing there attending to you. My wife and I, for our first wedding anniversary years ago, went to this really nice little restaurant in Williamsburg, Virginia, and it was a steakhouse that had like sort of a casual feel, sort of fancy. It was kind of strange. And the servers, I looked over and it's like all the servers are literally just standing looking at everybody in this dining room, like observing, scanning, and then they'll go do something. But they're not all just sitting in the back waiting for food to be ready to come out. They're literally standing just to be ready to do something if someone were to raise their hand or they notice something. And it really impressed me. It really, really impressed me. Um, so James, I have something I've done as a hiring person before as well. I've not given someone a leg up for this, but it's come up in conversation. I mentioned to a woman I work with, Michelle Mugley, who's been on I think a couple a podcasts in the AV world. She's a mom, and a year or so ago, I said something to her about how I feel like moms actually make some of the best workers. I, and she's like, "What?" And it's like, "Yeah, no, really. I know people want to apologize if they took a year or two off of work, they had kids, and they're like, okay, I've got a gap in my resume, and you would ask about it, and they say, well, I was basically 100% all day mom. That's what I was doing. That was my main focus. Sorry. Like, don't be sorry. You have probably learned some life lessons that many who would come into this role have not yet learned. We all have moms. I recognize that that's the case. I actually value all of those soft skills that I know you're coming to bring. um, Moms don't deal with nonsense. Like, meaning they don't put up with nonsense. It's one of the coolest things. And I've recognized that almost every woman I think that I've worked with who is a mom they are so good at conflict resolution. And I try not to say it out loud, but I'm going, even though they were dealing with children, somehow those same soft skills apply when they're dealing with adults. Maybe we don't really grow up that much, do we?
I would just
I Brittany DeCessory, who works for me and has been on our podcast before, she talks a lot about how moms are great at management because
Mhm,
they've had to manage their kids. And
mhm.
that's, she said, you could tell the difference between somebody who has kids and who doesn't, not because they don't possess the characteristics, they just haven't brought them out and had the time to practice them. And so I thought that it's a really good point you're making.
No, that's a great point. I agree because see, they're not just managing their kids; they also got to manage the household. They're doing a lot, sometimes the
Mhm.
finances and all that stuff. So they definitely have a lot of management skills. Another good skill I always chop up is, and especially going with for team building and relating with team, is people who play youth sports. And you can tell people who played sports and people who didn't. Now, again, this is not like 100% guaranteed. There's always, um, outliers and stuff, but the ones who tend to play youth sports tend to work better as a team and they
Mm.
understand their role within the team to help each other. Um, Prime example I had was high school. I played soccer in high school. We had a rule on the high school soccer team that the freshmen had to bring all the equipment out to the field. That was the role of the freshmen. The upperclassmen were not allowed to bring the gear out. But if any piece of gear was missing, the freshmen had to go back to the locker room to get it. And while they were doing that, the upperclassmen were running.
Okay.
So you mentor the freshmen to make sure the gear got out because again, you didn't want to run, but again, you're not doing the work, but you became a mentor to them and say, hey, don't forget the water, don't forget the balls, make sure that the details were taken care of. And I actually mentioned that to one of my coworkers years ago, and he didn't play sports, and he was like, "Well, that makes no sense. I didn't forget the gear. Why would I have to run?"
Mhm.
I was like, "But you did it as a team. That's it's the team's responsibility."
Yeah. We I think it was our maybe our second episode of Brave Skills where we talked about the idea of taking the credit. Like the challenge if you are a big L or little L leader, meaning you have a title that says you're a leader of a group or you're just a person who has to do some leading every once in a while. I think that's important to recognize. Like with programmers, you may not have a title that says I'm a leader, but you are a leader. Like every person in some sphere at some point kind of has an opportunity to function in a leader way to influence outcomes in a certain way. Um, Sorry, I lost my thought. Oh, we talked about taking credit, that a leader might take credit for a team's success. And we were asking the question, when the team succeeds, who's responsible? The answer is the team. Like the team's responsible. We will say on paper, such and such president, vice president, chairman of the board, whatever, that person, we look to them as the sort of the figurehead, not figurehead, but the one person you always see, and you say, under that person's leadership, this succeeded. But a good leader will recognize, yeah, but I didn't do everything. But then the other side is failure. What happens when who's ultimately to blame when there's a failure? Well, a leader oftentimes will say, I can take that one. We'll work on our issues, but like I'll shield the team from that. But we succeed and we fail as a team. We're not usually going to try to point at like one person. The leader will probably try to take it on themselves, but we don't try to point to one person as being the problem. We were all there. We were all on the team. you know, we all could have contributed one way or another. Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense to recognize that. I think that honestly is one of those soft skills as well, to realize that you are not an island. You should not function as an island, and you will succeed or fail, sort of in a lot of cases, because of the company that you're keeping. So have a good sphere around you, people that you can learn from, and expect of yourself something regardless of what other people expect of you. So if you are, say, you're early or mid career or early in your role in your company, no matter sort of what level you're at, you may not have a lot of people who expect much of you. They may not expect that you would even be interested in professional development. You know, if you're not a person that's saying, "Oh yeah, I want to have certain things after a comma after my name," or something like that, and that's okay. But that doesn't; those titles aren't what those titles aren't what make you good at what you do or able to have a really positive impact or influence. It's not
I
measured by that. So expect that you can do more and go down the road to trying to make those skills that you think you need to develop a little bit better.
Yeah, and I like how you use the big L and the little L.
Mhm.
Why I always chop it up is there's a manager and then there's leaders. Not every manager is a leader, and not
Mhm.
every leader is a manager. Sometimes you get both, but that's how I distinguish. A leader is someone who doesn't need the title. A manager is
Mm.
someone who needs the title. And I read this in a book, and I forget which book it was, but they were actually talking about, I think it was Jefferson or one of the presidents wanted to create the department. I think it was Department of Labor, and he was talking to his aide, and he mentioned to the aide, "I need to find somebody for this new department, Department of Labor." And the aide responds, "You should hire my husband." And the president responded, going, "Whoever takes his spot, the people need to follow." And they replied, "Once he has a title, they will follow them." And that was like to show, no, that's not how this works. As a
Right.
leader, people are going to follow you with the title or without the title. The title does not make you a leader. The title just makes you a manager, supervisor, executive, whatever leader type, big L you want to give it.
Mhm. Yeah, so I'm sorry. See, were you about to say something?
No, no, go ahead.
I had a great conversation with somebody at my last job. This person was not in the technical sphere or the technological sphere, but we work closely together. And they had asked about budget. They noticed that a lot of times, if I was asking for a budget, I got what I was asking for. And apparently, this person, who had a pretty important role within the operations of what we did as a company, or potentially impactful role, they were wondering why they were not getting funding. I didn't realize this was an issue, but they're like, I keep asking for funding and I don't get it. How are you getting it? And I told them, I'm gonna I can't tell you this is exactly the case. I'm just gonna tell you what I do. I make sure that my requests make sense for the people that I'm requesting it of. But then another thing is I try to make good on things when I'm given something to do. So then there's a level of trust there, and then they feel like they can give me more. You mentioned in our last episode that people on your team might struggle if someone brings them work that seems to not really fit the job description. And they may be confused and go, this person thinks I do too much. Or they don't understand what my role and my value is. And you said, no, actually they do understand your value. It's not what's on paper. You're a problem solver. You're a person that's actually taking care of things. You're taking the initiative, and they're bringing things to you to then help because they know they can. They know that you will help make this better. That would be another soft skill, I would say, to recognize, or something to aspire to in whatever role you're in or whatever level, to be the person that people want to rely on. Don't let yourself be overused, but be the person that someone wants to rely on if you're interested in advancing or just maintaining. wherever you're at, just digging in deeper. Be the person that someone wants to rely on. Make good on promises. Under promise, over deliver. That's always safer. Be willing to be really transparent about what's actually possible, because in the end, you don't have to renege on things, and people will see outcomes and output that helps them see that they can give you more. And they also can just see that if they put anything in your hands, they're safe hands. That's probably more. I can't think of too many things that have been impactful, I think, in my life. And I've seen that in others as well.
Yeah, I think all of these are great tips, I think, for programmers a lot of times that are doing things behind the scenes that are not necessarily the ones that get the credit when things are going well, but might be the one that the onus falls on when they need to deliver either in a tight deadline or make a client happy or perhaps fix an issue that they didn't cause. So, the but I think what the essence of what you're saying here is that they need to invest in themselves and find ways to be able to step forward and show what they're doing in a respectful way. And as you said, I think the last point really wraps it up well, is be the one that can be counted on and be relied upon, because honestly, that's such a great trait. I think that what I found in one of in this past year is that it sometimes those that are doing the hard work don't always get the recognition. So it's
Mhm.
important to not do it in a boastful way, but make sure that you're being you're getting the credit, if you will, for the things that you're doing and have been doing.
I
Mhm.
I agree with that. I think, and that's a hard part. And to quote our good friend Britt here, I love her saying that closed mouths don't get fed. And
Mhm.
it's really good. Like, yeah, we should. We're brought up. You don't seek the spotlight. You don't
Mhm.
boast. Oh, I did this. I did that. Cool. Because then you look as being a jerk, cocky, whatever term you want to throw in there. But there is something to say, no, hey, I did that. I helped the team succeed. I helped the organization succeed. And it's a fine line between going, I did that for me, or I did that for the organization. And I think it's a hard line for some people to realize, because they take ownership, like, oh, I did this, when really the organization, the team did it. You were
Mhm.
just the, I don't want to use this word because it's going to come out as seeming wrong. And the only one I can say, you were the catalyst there. That's the change. I was going to say tool, but no, you were the catalyst that made that
Mhm.
happen. Um, so yeah, you succeeded, you helped the organization, but really, as Leon, I think, said in the last episode, the team shines, or maybe in the first one, because we all work together.
Yeah. One final thing I'd add with that. Loving that you quoted Britt there. Uh, open. Britt and I have so many conversations that I don't even remember when they're recorded or when they're not. So I don't know if this is on an episode or not. Honestly, this could have just been us talking on the phone. But one of the other things I thought to say as we started is that I don't know if I would call this a soft skill, but I think it's a good idea. Volunteer yourself to do a thing. Um, you can always ask for someone can ask you and then you can respond to that. But if you see a need that can be filled and you actually are very interested in doing that, hopefully for good reasons, not just to make yourself look good, but to say, um, I think I can help that. I don't know that someone knows that I could do that. So I'm actually going to tell them. And also, you know, maybe say like, I'd like to try that. If we don't have anyone else, I'd like to be the one that tries that. Can I do that? You're now getting to kind of expand your breadth a little bit. Um, Getting to flex your wings or spread your wings a little further, which is always good. But volunteering before being asked or told to do something actually it really speaks volumes. So I don't think anyone should ever feel like they need to stay in a place that doesn't recognize what they do. That is not at all what any of us here are saying. If you're not being recognized and it's a real problem, that's indicative of other problems. But somebody somewhere does recognize what you're doing, even if you're kind of one of the silent heroes, because the work that you're doing will always speak volumes. And if you're a person that's putting yourself out there to do a thing, it's kind of hard to forget that. Um, it definitely makes a difference. I think we're probably getting to a closing point, so I'm going to mention. Are we? Am I right? Okay,
Yes.
so I'll mention the brief story I was talking about earlier. I was the hiring manager for a role. It was an AV role, and AV programming was absolutely irrelevant to it. I had two candidates that were front runners, and the HR person that was working with us on the interviews was very um, accommodating. And I asked her, would you mind if outside of the sort of we're sitting at the boardroom table talking to each other, outside of that, I would like to tell the candidates that I would like to do a practical part of this interview. And she was fine with it. I explained it. She was good with it. So they all knew we didn't shock them. They just didn't know exactly what was going to happen. So after the interview part was over, the traditional part, I had one candidate who looked amazing on paper, another candidate who had actually interned with us for a little bit, but really didn't have very much relevant experience. He just was really interested in the job. They were the two front runners. When we went into one of our event spaces that had a control interface that we had designed and had programmed in the space, what I asked them to do was I want you to have a mock scenario where the HR person is basically they're my plant. They're just going to act like I'm a person that's bringing a laptop and I need something presented during my event. I just need you to help me get that done. That's all. And I showed them how the control interface worked. Here's the deal. It didn't matter if they memorized anything I showed them with the control interface because they would learn that on the job. But it was simple things like you're just pressing this button, and you're done. Um, but you have to talk to them. What I did is I backed away and I said, you can use any resources that you want, anything at your disposal to help them do this. What happened in that interview was the person that had amazing experience on paper, perfect. It was strange that it was perfect. Like all the boxes were checked. Um, that doesn't usually happen. They bombed so hard when they then had to speak to this person. And the stakes are high. I recognize it. That can make you feel uncomfortable. It's a job interview. But on the job, the stakes are high too. So it's like, I realize this isn't a perfect scenario, and I'm not expecting you to be perfect. I'm just wanting to see how you handle it. And the other person with very little experience, this person shined. In fact, something broke during the session. Something broke. It wasn't their fault. And they actually, the HR person was like, "Well, oh, I'm sorry. Do we need to maybe stop?" And the guy's like, "No, no, hang on. We'll work this out. Just one second." And he just maintained calm, kept them engaged, and everything. He was like, I think we'll be able to take care of this. Don't worry." Um, but it's a small example, kind of, but he sort of volunteered in the moment to say, "Hey, how about I help you solve this?" I didn't need him to solve anything. I just needed to see how he talked to the person. But he's like, "Hang on, let's try to do this." Um, I have never regretted hiring that person. Because in the end of the day, I'm not going to be standing there all the time, and I can't coach you constantly on how to talk to the person who doesn't know technology like you do. Knowing that he could handle it and would try to treat that person as a person and try to keep them calm and whatnot, amazing. Volunteer, put yourself out there. I can't stress that enough.
That's a great way for us to wrap this. Thank you for sharing that because I
Mhm.
think that the lesson learned, at least for me, is that you don't have to be the best at what you do. You should be the most well-rounded and the most resourceful, and a lot of the skills that aren't necessarily associated with the heart of the job or what could be the deal breaker. So these are all great things. Um,
Mhm.
Leon, thanks for being with us. Great conversations. We really would love to have you back and have some more of
Absolutely.
these and perhaps even do something with you with Brave Skills. Please, if you are in our audience and you want to get more in tune with some of the things that Leon is talking about, make sure you subscribe to the Brave Skills podcast and as well as Brave Space that Britt Yencher does as well. We'll give her a plug. But
Mhm.
so Leon, how can people get in touch with you? How can they learn more about what you're doing and also continue some of this conversation?
Sure. So with that podcast, we actually take questions as well. So we're always interested in those. So the Brave Skills podcast, it's two words, Brave Skills. You can find that on Apple Podcasts or just kind of Google it. I think we're on Amazon. We're on a lot of things. You can find us through the HETMA website as well. We've got forums for sending in questions to continue these kinds of conversations. But it's also really easy to just find me on LinkedIn. I'm Leon Prather, Prather. And I think I'm the only one that has CTS in his name. So that should be easy. And if you can see me, you'll see my face here and you'll find the picture that is me. But another easy way, if you want to go straight directly to me for certain inquiries for speaking or anything like that, would actually be leonprather.com. But I'm fairly easy to find on the internet.
Excellent. So please do, and you won't be disappointed when you do find him. And make sure you take the time to introduce yourself, and hopefully we'll be able to find you in our Ask the Programmer community as well.
Mhm.
James, how could people get in touch with you if you have any closing thoughts, and how can they continue the conversation?
So closing thoughts. I think if anybody like if you take anything away from this episode, is what Leon hit at the end is about volunteering. Volunteering for new tasks, putting yourself out there is huge. But I also say, we talked early on about big L, little L, or leader, manager volunteering as a supervisor or like any like volunteer group, nonprofit will determine if you're a leader or just a supervisor because
Mm.
getting people who don't rely on you for a certain thing like a paycheck and getting them to follow you is key. And then the one other volunteer thing I would say is volunteer to shadow. Like if you see somebody on your team or even a contractor or a vendor who's, programming something, new piece of equipment that you have no experience, say, hey, can I just watch you? Volunteer that. Just I did that a lot on my old job. Well, it's like we had vendors come in and they were doing something. I'm like, hey, can I just kind of hang out here and see what you're doing? And I learned
Mhm.
and I got to the point where I actually had a contractor who said to me, he's like, "I love it when you call about an issue because I know it's an issue." Because I did all the grunt work before that you're like, "Oh, it's not just unplug it and plug it back in." Like he's like, "There's a true issue here." He's like, "I love it." Like these other calls I get, I just unplug the cable, plug it back in, and it's like wasting my time. He said waste of his time. So you learn valuable from volunteering. Just again, not part of your job, but I shadowed people. So highly recommend that. Again, Google me, you'll find me. Ask the programmer community. I'm out there.
Excellent. And one other thought that I had, and we can maybe talk about this on a future podcast, is that leaders also need to be more receptive to the people that are raising their hand and be have their eyes open to be able to recognize those that are trying to stretch and step up and do some things because there could be some blindness there. So it's something to make sure to if you are in that role to make sure that you're taking the time to do that. I've fallen victim to it, and that's why it's a good thing to share.
Mm.
For me, you could find me on social media at Steve Greenblatt. You can find my company Control Concepts at controlconcepts.net, and we're a supporter of this podcast and build some of the interfaces that make products easier to control and add functionality to systems. So all of that can be found on our website. As we've alluded to, you can be watching the show or you could be listening to the show. You can find us on YouTube or your favorite podcast player. Both of those are great ways to connect with us as well. So please subscribe and leave rating, review, feedback, and so forth. And if you'd like to join us on a show as Leon did, please reach out. And here's a great opportunity for a programmer to maybe stretch and do something new, and good
Mhm.
tie-in here. So if you do reach out and you want to be part of the show, we will accept that request and have you on. So it's that easy. So please reach out to us. And if you do have a question or topic, we would be glad to cover it, or you can talk about it in the community that we have on LinkedIn called Ask the Programmer. So thank you for listening and watching. Until next time, this has been Ask the Programmer.